Okay, and here we are. We are live. Welcome to our seventh episode, seventh episode of the BAM series. We're super excited for our guest here tonight. We have Adriel Hanson, who is one of my favorite people. You guys tonight, after you hear his story and hear a little bit more about who he is and what he stands for and what he's been through, you'll be able to um, get the idea of why he's one of my favorites and a community favorite. I won't post you up way too much, but you already know you're one of probably one of the most humble and kinder ones that we have, and Adriel's that guy that you go and you talk to, and he's really understanding and empathetic and supportive and just wants to really help you find who you are and then help you grow into your place. And I don't think it matters whether or not you're in recovery or not, or if you're looking for recovery or not. Adriel is just that guy who always wants to help and just make you be the better version of you. And so um he does a lot of really great work too. So I'm super stoked kind of just to have you on. Um how are you and things?
Thanks. I'm doing great, honestly. It's been tough. Been working from home the last couple of weeks. But I feel like the connection is strong, and that's what I found in recovery is like as long as we're willing to stay connected, the opportunity is there. And so I still get the opportunity to meet with people and attend meetings and be a part of, but I feel like I can sometimes reach out more in the virtual world. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, and you have one of the, and we'll get into it. We won't talk too much now, but you started in, wasn't it right during COVID where you got the job with USARA? So
Yeah.
you got the perfect job for somebody who's passionate about recovery and helping people in really the perfect time, like at the beginning of COVID back in March, it was really scary for a lot of people, as we all know. I mean, the fear of the unknown was there. And for people in recovery, it was like, what are we going to do? We watched a lot of people, probably you've seen many people close in somewhat of your inner circle, go down really quickly. And it was shocking because it was like, how did you go down? I thought you were doing really good. And the word COVID came and pandemic, and now we're helping you get back on your feet. Um, COVID's been hard, I think, for everybody, but a blessing. I mean, for me in my life, it's probably been the best thing that could have ever happened to my family because, for us, my dad and I didn't have that great of a friendship. It's still been really rocky from just my past and how I treated him and, whatever, to where I sit upstairs and we binge watch TV together and have coffee every morning. And for me, it's been a really beautiful experience, but it hasn't been that for everybody. So I've been lucky. You've had some trauma, not trauma, but some craziness happen, and life just hit you hard a couple times throughout COVID, and you're still standing, which is rad.
Yeah, I mean, we had to make a lot of adjustments. I was working at that staffing agency, and making the leap to USARA was a huge leap for me. Which it was just one of those things that I did what I felt was right in the time, and I made the right decision. They ended up selling out to a different company. Who knows if my position would still even exist? That was a position I really advocated for because of my background and was able to get. And so I don't know if that would have transferred over to the new agency or not. So I'm grateful that I made the moves that I did, but it changed things a lot for me. Like we lost a car this year, and the recovery community rallied around us, and now we have a van that we own, which was cool. I mean, I am so humbled and grateful for the opportunities that I have. And it's just one of those things. Like, I totally believe in karma, and it's all about paying things forward. And my whole life I've done everything I can to help others, and that definitely came back full circle. And not the reason why I ever did anything, but, definitely showed up, and the community showed up for me. And I'm just so grateful to be a part of such a large community here in Salt Lake, especially. We're just so diverse. It's amazing the community that we have, because you look at some of the rural areas and even other states that just aren't close to what we are. We have so much opportunity and recovery here. And as long as you're willing to be a part of, you'll have family and people around you.
Yeah, we're lucky. I think I say it more often than not that, like, years ago, Utah was not the place to be if you were trying to recover, because it was a very, I don't know if stigmatic is the right word, but stigma really, it's Utah. It was like every other small country, suburban town that was like, shh, we don't talk about addiction and pretend it's not happening. And we have the big LDS culture, which Salt Lake is not, it doesn't really affect us here, I don't think, as much as it did, 10 years ago. But it used to not be a place where you would want to be getting sober at. And now we're in this place that is, especially, you saw your job helps to make it possible for us to have a safe place. Like, people come here. I don't know if you know this, it's kind of cool, but people seek out coming to Utah now to come to treatment because they know and are told that there's a huge recovery community to join, that you can get sober afterwards and have a community where you're safe and you can go out and be loud and advocate and recover happily and openly. And it's beautiful.
Yeah, Utah itself has really adapted. I mean, it's crazy to see the evolution that we have. Like, yeah, I grew up LDS. I'm not active right now. I haven't been for a while, but are a lot of the norms have changed. It used to be more common for us to see, people kind of being not open, feeling really uncomfortable to share things or to talk about stuff. But like, when my house got raided, we had gotten really close to the people in our area, and the people in our ward. And they all came over as our house was being raided, and were asking the cops if we were okay, if they wanted us to take the kids. Like, I mean, they were just there to show up. And when I went to jail, they showed up for Kirsten. And I just, afterwards, they all came to me and told me stuff like addictions that they had and things that they were going through, just to let us know that, like, we were still welcome. It didn't matter that we had 25 narcotics officers all over the streets with assault rifles in an area that we lived in East Mill Creek. Like, that kind of stuff just didn't happen in our neighborhood. Everybody was attorneys around us, but it was cool because they all really showed up for us, and they told us, like, you guys matter, and you guys, whatever it is, it's okay. And they opened up. And I have people, somebody that was on the bishopric that told me that he was addicted to pain pills and that he couldn't keep them himself, that he had to have his wife hold on to them. And I had other neighbors come to me with other addictions that were just like, look, we're all just people too, and we get it. And that just really opened my eyes to the community that we have here. And just, and that's, to me, what religion is all about, is loving one another, like as if we're brothers and sisters, because we really are. And there shouldn't be any judgment. Like, who are we to judge? We all have our own stuff that we do. But it was cool to see so much unity, because growing up, I remember when I was 13 or 14, when I originally left the church was not open, and there were things that were pretty rough. And I saw a huge change in a lot of different communities. And I've seen a huge change in even the LDS community. As we've evolved. As a state, I feel like we've really evolved. And I think addiction was the thing that did that for us, because opiates didn't discriminate. And we saw that a lot with the LDS church, because everybody was being prescribed opiates. It didn't matter who you were. And everybody was recognizing that addiction doesn't just affect, it affects everybody.
Yeah. I think that's one of the best things that we have going for Utah. And one of the reasons why, we started to do this series as an open panel, which was to be able to show what, just as you said, addiction doesn't discriminate. And not that I look the greatest today, but, but on the norm, I feel proud to say, these faces that we're looking at, yours and mine, are what the faces of recovery look like today. And stigma teaches us that the faces of recovery are not this, and so we've chosen to be an open forum so that we can have people advocate for everybody. And as we kind of get into this, to Adriel's story tonight, you guys are going to hear some, what turned him into the man that he is today. He touched briefly just now on his house being raided, and for those who don't know, East Mill Creek is one of the more middle class, upper class neighborhoods here in Salt Lake, and it's a beautiful neighborhood, and definitely they definitely don't want their house. Nobody wants to have raids going on in their house, but we get to talk about these things openly today, because Adriel and myself and a lot of other people are now willing to advocate for change and advocate and show people what, just because we were people like this when we were, stuck in our actively using or active in our disease, that we can change, that we do recover, and what that looks like to other people. And so I could go off for hours just on my passion for why I love recovery and I love advocating and not being anonymous. Adriel's on the bandwagon to not be anonymous. And, what that means is that we're willing to put ourselves out there, or a person, or you could, what does that mean? Let's say to you, what does it mean to not be anonymous?
So for me, it's like we recover loudly so others don't have to die in silence anymore. I am not quiet about my recovery. I don't keep it a secret. When I have opportunities to talk about it, I do. I stand up for recovery. I don't feel any need to not tell somebody about it. It's actually really important to me. When I go to work for a job or do anything, like that is at the forefront of my mind is my recovery, because my recovery has to come first. But I also want it to be loud and I want it to be proud because I want people to feel like they can talk about it. For so long, we kept these things quiet and people just went and dealt with them in quiet rooms. And it's not about that now. It's about making a movement and getting people talking, and having those hard conversations so people don't have to be alone. It's the isolation of addiction that holds us back. And once it's out in the open and once you see people recovering, like I chase the people who had what I wanted. And I try to be that person now. Like I want to be that person that somebody in early recovery wants what they have. And I hear that all the time, like I see you out there talking about your recovery and out sharing your story. And that really inspired me. And to me, that's huge because I came into recovery hoping I could change one person's life. And it's been a whole lot more than that. So like I've already fulfilled what I set out to do. And now the rest of it is just the byproduct of, me continuing to work in this field. And I'll continue to do so. My goal is to work with adolescents, and I'll get into kind of why that is in my story. But my goal is to work with adolescents, and I won't stop until I get there. I won't stop until I've changed the juvenile justice system. I want to make a difference. I want to be able to impact people on every level. And right now, while I'm still dealing with the charges that I have, I work with adults, and I love it. But there's a lot of need for me in the juvenile world, and I will get there as soon as I can get past my charges, which is a little less than 4 years now. So I can do that.
Oh yeah, I know. We have to chat whenever eventually we're going to have that conversation. Yeah. Because there's a lot of, the youth are what many of us are passionate about, because as your story, we'll kind of start to get into your story, but I would imagine your story is similar to mine where, you started using it. I think you said 15, right?
I started drinking at 12 and I started using meth at 15.
Yeah. So your story, is definitely similar to many where, and I'll let you kind of share your story and we can start and kind of go into that. But a lot of us, sadly, 12 and 13 is like the common age for most people, to start using. And there's a really sad common denominator of people whose family members at the age of 10 to 12 are shooting them up for the first time. And so, I mean, it's very common thank God that's not our stories, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of people who that is their story. And it's at a very young age where we're being molded and our brains aren't developing correctly because we get these really good ideas that that's the right life for us to be living. And we want to, for whatever reason. So I guess kind of just starting off on that, I'll let you kind of jump into your story and tell us a little bit about what it was like for you as a kid and how your disease came into that word. I'm like into that word. How it harvested.
For sure. I always like to, and I think where my story began really. So my parents met in rehab in New York. My dad kind of just did everything. My mom was addicted to coke. They decided to move to Puerto Rico to get away from all the drugs in New York. They didn't want to raise their kids in that kind of environment. Right before I was born, Hurricane Hugo hit Puerto Rico and devastated the island. I mean, took out our neighbor's house, took down power lines. I mean, very similar to what we've seen recently. And my parents had just joined the LDS church. So they went from being, in active addiction to being in recovery. And my dad was a branch president in Puerto Rico. And my mom had her degree in social work from New York University. So the church put us up in a high rise, and my sister was trying to get out the windows, and she's just 18 months older than me. So they put baby gates up everywhere, but my mom was 4'11", and so she was trying to climb over a baby gate one night and fell on it and immediately went into labor. And this was over 2 months early. And so in 1989 and in Puerto Rico, healthcare was awful. They actually had to transfer her from one hospital to the other one across the island because they just didn't have adequate care, and I was going to die. And so even in the other hospital, they told my mom that I likely wasn't going to make it. It was a really, really, really rough labor. My entrance into this world was nothing easy. And they said I wasn't going to make it. And 2 days later, I was sent home and was healthy. And so, the beginning of my life was just something different. We moved to Utah shortly after because they didn't want, the hurricane had devastated the island and there was no home for us to go back to. And so the church offered to move us here. So we came here. My mom immediately got a job at DCFS. She was a caseworker there, a crisis worker for 7 years. My dad ended up getting back into drugs, and my mom came home one day and he had been asleep all day, and my sister was feeding us Kool-Aid packets. And we were living in the types of homes that my mom was taking kids away from while she was out taking kids away. And so my parents split. My dad took off. I didn't talk to him again until I was 7. My mom fell in love with her best friend, so I grew up with 2 moms. And I just remember growing up, like, people used to always say that my parents were dykes, and stuff that I didn't understand. It didn't make sense to me because they weren't really open about their relationship with us. And we went to church every Sunday, and we sat in the front row. Her girlfriend had 4 kids. My mom had 4 kids, and we showed up to church every week. And I just like that, I look back on that now, and their faith was so inspiring because they sat there every day knowing that people were sitting there judging them, and it didn't matter to them at all. Like, 2 of the most amazing people I've ever met in my life, my moms, that really raised me. And so when they broke up. So my mom and her girlfriend broke up when I was maybe 8 years old because my mom wanted to follow the teachings of the church. And so my mom never dated ever again. She stayed single the rest of her life until she passed away. And shortly after, there was a lady who had broke her baby's arms and legs. My mom took the baby away, and her boss told her to give the baby back. My mom took him to court. She won. The little girl ended up getting raised by her grandma in Park City. But my mom got fired for insubordination. And so he made it so she couldn't get a job for the next 5 years because her other jobs were in Puerto Rico after college. And so everywhere called DCFS, and he would always give her a bad review and say she was a horrible employee. And just, I mean, we were homeless. Like, we had nothing. I remember just the church supported us for a long time. Like, the only reason that we could ever have anywhere to stay. And so it was like, my mom was still sober, but I was living like, like a lot of my friends did, who had parents that were addicted to drugs that couldn't get their shit together. But my mom had her shit together. Her moral compass was just so strong. And it's the reason I am who I am today. So everything started young for me. Like, after experiencing homelessness, and every year we moved and we got evicted from almost every place we ever lived at, because it was always kind of bouncing around. I started drinking when I was 12 pretty heavily. Like, I would drink wine before I'd go to school in the morning just to like feel okay. I was on the honor roll from junior high all the way through high school. When I dropped out, like, I've maintained a 4.0. I was named who's who of America's high school students. I had a full ride scholarship to whatever college I wanted to go to, whatever I wanted to do. And then when I was 13, I came out as gay. And that brought its own challenges, because at that point was when I decided to leave the church, and my mom made that an option for me. But then none of my friends accepted me anymore at school and everywhere else. And I just didn't understand it, because I had grown up so open and understanding and accepting of people. It didn't make any sense. And, by the time I was 15, I started using meth. And I mean, nobody my age was really using meth. It was mostly with my friends' parents and other people that I was using, all adults. Got into crazy situations, had a lot of guns pulled on me, was involved in the middle of a kidnapping. Like, there was just crazy stuff that I was too young to be seeing. I had to go testify in a case and a kidnapping when I was 15. And my mom sat right next to me, and it was the only reason that I could go, but I knew that it was the right thing to do. I knew that I had to do it. And then I went to a few different rehabs when I was 15. I started selling drugs when I was 16. And that really has been a huge addiction of mine as well. The hustling of it all has always been, it's hard for me. It's hard because I was used to always having as much cash as I needed. And it's obviously a lifestyle I had to veer far away from. But when I was 17, I got locked up. And they were trying to federally indict me at 17. Had they been able to, I was looking at 32 years to life. Because of all the meth that I had on me, and mandatory minimums back then. I mean, I was just like, they're like, you're going to spend the rest of your living days in jail. So I fought my case for a long time. They let me stay in the juvenile system, charged me as a juvenile, and charged me with I got charged with one felony. But it took a long time and a lot of fighting, and I don't know. So I got out. I went to 3 different residential programs, which was just crazy. It was 100-mile hikes, 7-day 100-mile hikes, either in the freezing cold. I remember sleeping out some nights in negative 20-degree weather, and you literally had to take yourself out of your own body to be able to just like sleep. And in the heat of over 100 degrees, like 120 degrees, climbing up Nebo, just crazy. And the last place I went to, it was just like, it was all behavioral. We never talked about substance use. And I always thought it was so weird, because my problem was substance use, and we're in here talking about behaviors, and it sparked my interest. And so on my 18th birthday, I ran. And when I got back to town, I called the tracker. So I had run previously several times, and this tracker always found me at the weirdest places. And so when I got home, I turned myself in. He took me to jail. Jail released me. My judge was out of town, so I was on my own for 2 months before I got to go to court. And I just did everything right. I didn't use drugs. I went and got a full-time job. When I showed up in court, she immediately had me put in handcuffs. And they were like, "You're going to Decker Lake for 2 years. We're not playing around. We're done with you." and they ended up staffing it. And they decided so I told them, I said, look, in here, all these people are talking about, going out and committing more crimes together. And I'm like, that's just not for me. Like, I was like, I understand what I did and the severity of, my addiction, but I don't feel like it was getting handled in there. So they decided to give me an opportunity. They gave me 3 months probation. I In 3 months, I got a job as a manager of a call center. I managed a team of like 120 people. I got my license back. I bought a car, and I stayed sober. They had this tracker just randomly show up at my work and at home all the time and make me pee in a cup right in front of him. And I was sober every time because I just that's what I wanted. They terminated my juvenile case, and I stayed clean for 3 years, 4 months, and 7 days. But I didn't have any aftercare. Like, I had nothing. The only thing that I'd ever gone to was a 12-step meeting, AA, at the Magna Al-Anon Club. And if you haven't been there, you don't know. But I mean, it was just
Magna.
Yeah, seriously. It was just a bunch of really old dudes, and it's actually pretty crazy. So I live in Magna now, which is somewhere I thought I'd never be. But after my raid, this is like what I had, and this is my option. But it was crazy because it was a bunch of old men, in AA. And I remember the first time I said I was a drug addict, and everybody turned and looked at me, and my sponsor took me out, and he's like, "Yeah, you can't say that in here. Like, you're an alcoholic." And I was just like, I don't fucking get it. Like, I don't get it. Like, none of it made any sense. So I'm like, I learned to talk and be open about this, but you're telling me that I can't talk and be open about it? Like, I don't get it. And so it was after that I stopped going to any aftercare meetings because there was nothing else. And I mean, this was back in 2007, and there wasn't shit. I mean, we didn't have anything compared to what we have now. And so anyways, 3 years later, I was just around somebody that I could tell was using. And so I asked him, if he could pick me some up. And that started kind of this up and down tumble for a while. In that same time, I decided that I did like girls. So I identify as bi. And I've now married, have 3 kids. But that, being gay was the stigma that I went through my whole, late teenhood into my early adulthood. People just always treating me like as if I was less than, or that I was scary or was going to try to hit on them or something. And I'm just not. Like, I have respect. So it was crazy. Like, I met a girl, she had two girls, and to me I was like, wow, this is what I want. Like, family is what I want. But she was using heroin and I was using meth, and we could not get our shit together. And there was some stuff that, broke some trust, and I was heartbroken, and it led me into this long lapse. And then I met my wife, Kirsten, and that pulled me out of it. I was just like, all right, cool. I'm not going to use, like, this girl's different. I don't want to be a part of that. And so we had, good thing. I had a DUI, which really got me sober and kept me on the right track. And then I worked my way up. So I did never go to college, but I worked my way up in the business world, and ended up taking a position as chief operating officer at a business finance company. And my mom got to see me live out this dream. In 2016, my mom passed away from lupus. I found her dead in her apartment. That's one of the hardest things that I've ever had to go through. She was my best friend. She was somebody I could always be honest with. Like, I mean, having a mom as a social worker is one of the coolest things, because, like, she didn't hit. Like, we talked things through. Like, my whole life was one whole fucking process group. Every day, if I did something wrong, we talked. We'd get to the core root of the problem and figure it out, and, like, we'd do it together. I was never alone. I didn't have to suffer alone. And so when my mom passed away, it was like, it's feeling like I was suffering alone. And my dad, me and him had fallen off because he told me when I was 16 that he could fix me being gay, and that, that there was something wrong with me. And so at that time I told him, like, you've never been there for me, so I don't need you in my life. And so we didn't have any communication for a long time, really, until my mom passed away. Me and my dad got really close. And my dad, he had cirrhosis of the liver. So he was, the whole time, from when I was 13, or from when I was 7, until I was, whenever my mom passed away, so 4 years ago. My dad was diagnosed with cirrhosis of the liver, and they told him he only had, a year left to live, and he ended up living a few years. But I remember just feeling really angry that, my mom had lupus and died, and she was, 30 years sober. And, my dad was speedballed his whole life and was like, able to be kept alive. But me and him got really close. And I remember he asked me, like, do you want to talk? Like, do you want me to tell you, what happened? And I told him, like, that I had already processed everything, that, and honestly, I would have rather just known my mom's side of the story. Like, that's all I wanted. My mom was everything to me, like, just straight gold. And so I told him, I said, I forgive you for everything, and I don't want to know, like, I don't know if it'll help me. I don't think it will. And I don't want to know. But after my mom passed away was when the lapses started again. And I would drink really heavy. And then that would make me want to use meth. And then, I, I'd get clean. I'd stay good for a while. I was chief operating officer at this time. I was making 6 figures a year. I mean, we lived in a beautiful house in East Mill Creek. We had a huge 4 bedroom, 2 bath. We had, 12,000 square foot lot. We had the most beautiful yard. I mean, everything. Our kids had a sandbox. We had a garage. We had a little movie theater set up downstairs. I mean, it was literally the dream. I was living the dream that I've always wanted and that I always worked towards. And then I couldn't, the lapses kept getting worse and worse. And at first I'd get 2 or 3 months. And then it was like, I couldn't get more than 2 weeks. And I remember there was just this month, right after we had our Adriel, my third son, right after we had him was when I was just like, literally my weeks were just blending together, and I just couldn't remember when the last time was that I hadn't used. And I was done. Like, I was done. So I went to uni, and I started talking to Dr. Javier Ballester Gonzalez. And I'm not sure I understand. Here, freaking me out every time we go to say something, right? So, like, they're still listening. So I went to uni, and I was just done. I actually have a journal where I wrote. So it was between June and September of 2018 where I kept writing, "Today's the last day." And my handwriting was so shaky because I was always like either super high or drunk, and like still trying to maintain this position as chief operating officer. And our company was growing and things were changing. And I was just trying to hold things together. And finally, the last day that I put in there, it was actually September 3rd, that I was like, this is it. Today I'm done. And that was my second appointment at uni. And I walked in there high, and I told him, I was like, I'm high, but I'm done. Like, today's the last day. And, I was still smoking weed at the time and still drinking. And so that was the next thing we were working on. And so I was like, in this next month, I'm going to stop smoking weed. I'm going to stop drinking. And that's what I'm going for. And then September 26th, my house was raided. And I ended up getting 2 felony distributions, 2 possession of firearm by restricted person, and 3 counts of child endangerment or exposing a child to a controlled substance, which is a thing that's holding me back from working in the juvenile world right now. But they were all reduced down to misdemeanors. So my case closed almost a year ago. So I have 4 years left until I can get my expungement. And so I have these plans that I get to work towards now. The raid was cool because it took everything out of my house that I couldn't take out myself. I had taken the biggest leap forward, but there was this last little step, and it was actually a controlled buy. Somebody bought like $80 worth of weed from me, and they followed me around for a month, and I wasn't really doing much. And so finally, they decided to just hit my house. And at the time, I was so angry at them, and I was so angry at the person who did it. And now I'm so grateful for them because it literally got everything out of my house that I couldn't get out myself because everything that I was doing was completely unmanageable. And it sucks because my wife was charged with the same stuff. And she's never had charges before in her life. She wasn't involved in things. And so it's tough. And it's this shame and guilt that I carried. But I also hit this moment where I was like, what's best? Like, do I need to leave? Like, am I the one that's hurting my family? And now 2 years later, I am really grateful that I'm stuck around because I get to show up today. I get to get my kids ready for school. I get to help them with homework. I get to be a part of, but the thing that got me in was, so I sat in jail for 3 days. My wife's never had to deal with anybody being in jail, so she didn't even know how to put money on a phone card. You really my boss, actually, at the time, he got me a bail bondsman out of St. George to sign my bail with nothing. So I got really lucky. I got money basically fronted to me out of future checks to cover all of my attorney's costs, to cover my bail to get out. But I sat in jail for 4 days with no communication at all. So I had no idea what was going on. I couldn't get a hold of anybody. I was just like lost. But it was really this moment of clarity for me where I was just like, I'm going to fucking do it this time. Like I'd already been sober, pretty sober for 3 weeks. But that was it. I was like, this is it. Like, I don't ever have to go back to jail again. Like, this is going to be the last time that I ever have to be here. And I went back to work, and Chris Rufflin introduced me to YPR. He said, hey, man, why don't you come down and, see a YPR meeting? It was pretty interesting. I had to, take our whole team of people that I worked with at this company and tell them all, hey, this is what happened. I went to jail, and just kind of explain that. And like, it really helped me find that voice where like, I don't need to be quiet about this. And a lot of people were spreading rumors. And so I was able to say like, hey, this is exactly what happened. And I told them, if any of you have any questions or any concerns about who I am, like, come in my office and talk to me because I'd be more than happy to talk this out with you. And you don't have to think that this is okay. Like, you don't have to be okay with this, but this is the reality of where I'm at. And this is, who I am. And, so I went, YPR was really that first thing that I joined. And then I got involved with USARA doing Family Fun Night. And me and my wife ran Family Fun Night as volunteers forever. At first, we were doing it for community service. And then it just became a thing that we loved. Once our community service was done, we couldn't, it was just a thing that we loved so much that if we were going on vacation, half of us, one side of us would go first and then the other one would go later because Family Fun Night was this obligation that we loved, is something that we got to do. And I loved seeing families show up and just be a part of and, join in. And it's same with YPR. I saw these opportunities of just bringing people together. And then YPR taught me, all these other things. My boss, I think the hardest thing was, my house was raided for weed. My boss at the time, he asked me to come in and talk to him and asked if there was anything else. And there was this secret that had been burning inside of me forever that I wanted to talk to him because he, really was my best friend. And I still consider him a great friend, even though he doesn't talk to me. I can't blame him, but I told him, he said, is there anything else you need to tell me? And I was like, yeah, I've been having relapses, since my mom passed away. And he was like, on what? And I told him meth, and he just sat there for a while and had to weigh out his options. And a couple weeks later, I was let go, which was one of the hardest things. We were making great money and it afforded us all these nice things. And, I'm really grateful because I was taken care of. I was still paid for months afterwards. So I got to really take time with my family and really sort through all this wreckage, but knowing that things were going to change. They were not going to be the same. I couldn't afford the lifestyle we had. We had brand new cars. We had this beautiful house. So we started looking and we got this place here in Magna. We live in a basement apartment. We went from 2,000 square feet to probably 1,000 square feet, 4 beds, 2 living rooms to, one smaller living room and 2 bedrooms. It's been an adjustment. I've actually lost 2 cars. I had 2 brand new cars that are both gone now. I got a great opportunity from my friend to buy an old cop car, which was really cool because he works with me and is always really supportive and tells me, if you need help, just let me know and I can skip by that. And then we have our van that the recovery community really supported us on. And so that alleviated a lot of that for us. And now, I mean, I work at USARA. So YPR taught me to be loud about my recovery, to be able to share, but it also taught me how to advocate for myself. So I went to this staffing agency because I had applied a bunch of places and they all turned me down because I, at the time, had all these pending felonies, which looked really bad. I mean, I had my firearms crimes, my distributions, and my, child endangerment. It didn't look good. It really didn't look good. And so I went to the staffing agency. I got this job and, I ended up getting an account manager position there, was making really good money. And then they were changes. And the changes were going to put me down to, USARA twice had offered me a position there. And the changes were going to put me down to what I'd make at USARA. And so I told the staffing agency that if I was going to make less money, I would rather make less money doing what I love. And so I turned in my notice that day and I said, look, I'm willing to hire and, train somebody else, send them my way. I'll give them all the knowledge that I have. I'll get them up to speed, but I quit. And this was right before the pandemic, which is crazy because the staffing industry had been pretty shaky during the pandemic. And so it's really interesting. I made this leap of faith and now I'm in this most amazing place. Now I get to coach people as a peer. I get to show up. I get to inspire change. People feel like they can reach out to me. And I'm open and understanding. Like I support medically assisted treatment to the fullest extent. I support harm reduction to the fullest extent, and I advocate for those things all the time. It's pretty interesting because you won't see me share a lot of things publicly. I'm pretty political when it comes to recovery, when it comes to certain things. But when it's time for me to fight, I put up the fight. I have my hands in a lot of different pots right now. Like I work at a treatment center that's abstinent based, and so I keep myself very neutral because I let people add me that are, either clients from there or my participants. And so you'll notice that like my Facebook stays very rigid. I talk about my recovery a little bit. I share things, but I wait for my opportunities to jump in and support. But, I support all these things. I support all these pathways. And now I've tried everything. I've been to every 12-step group possible. I've been to every other meeting that I can. And I try to find people what fits best for them. I think another thing that's interesting is like I've suffered with bipolar since I was 15. And most of my life, like my bipolar is managed with my medications. And I feel great. I used to drive really crazy. I used to have bad road rage. I am a compulsive gambler, compulsive shopper. And once I got on my bipolar medications, it calmed all that down. And so now I drive really sane. I don't shop like crazy. I don't really care for gambling much anymore. And it also reduces my triggers. And so that's one thing that I advocate for too, is mental health. And that's something, the field that I see myself working in too, moving down the line. And I'm just so grateful to be a part of things. I admin Addicted We Stand, which has been really huge for me. BAM has really been a huge organization for me. Rachel's just fucking awesome. And we've just gotten really close. It's funny because we both always are kind of doing the same thing, just in our own way and different.
I know.
We like when we have the opportunity to connect. We're so similar and we have all these ideas, but we're both just so busy. But it's not a bad thing because we're busy doing good things, showing up for people.
Yeah, it's rad because we're on the same wave, and it's nice because I think you're 3 years, right? Ish.
2.
Aren't you 3 years? 2? We're
Yep.
close. We're close in the same time frame of recovery. I'm doing the wave. I got the wave going on with my hand. but we do have a lot of the same passions and things that we want to do, you know, long-term goals and just things that we're doing right now. And it's so rewarding to know like there's someone out there like me who and when I say that, it's like, you know, you like you said, you have your hand in all the different pots and you're able to really find what works well for each person. You know, there's the truth is, and you hear it a lot, you know, everybody recovers in their own way. And we have to create a space and be able to have the conversations with people that are non-judgmental. You know, I love how you had said just in the beginning part of you getting right in your recovery, you know, you were like, I'm stopping the meth and then I'm going to stop the weed and the alcohol. You know,
Yeah.
you had to go by, do it in steps. And a lot of times we're taught or told, you know, and this isn't to bash anybody. I love you, Trina, and it's not to bash or judge anybody. It's to say, you know, some people can't start their treatment abstinent. You know, like abstinence is what works for me, but I'm like the first one out there to be like, hey, who needs a needle? You know what I mean? Like we have to not in a bad way, you know, for in the harm reduction way, and we
Yeah.
have to be able to give people, create space for everybody. You know, if we're out there judging people because their recovery doesn't look like ours, all we're doing is pushing people further and further away from getting better. And that's, you know, I've learned through what was brought to me and, you know, into my world for a long time, that it's not accepted. And we have to create space for people that make it safe. So it's cool that, you know, you get to work. I mean, it's probably hard to teeter back and forth because in a treatment center, you can't tell them, well, when you get out, you're allowed to do whatever you want.
Yeah.
You know, like we have to teach them that. But then where you're working, it's really pro, you know, Matt, and finding a way, because really our brains, you know, the truth is when we're using our brains are, you know, for our brain cells are damaged, and you know, we become dependent on things, and sometimes we have to create a happy balance. You know, there's chemical imbalances and there's deformed brain cells and there's things that we have to um put back together, and sometimes abstinence isn't the way. Not that I'm advocating for anybody to not go be abstinent now just because we said that.
For sure.
You know?
I think it's important though that we advocate for this kind of stuff, and I think that that's what we're seeing now. You know, more recently than ever, because harm reduction isn't new, but a loud and proud harm reduction, that's different. It's about not being quiet about our recovery, not being quiet about harm reduction, because if we can get somebody to, you know, reduce use or reduce the risk of their use in general, then we're saving lives. It's like Narcan and naloxone. It's about saving lives. I don't care how many times you have to be brought back. That's one more chance that you get to try at recovery. That's one more chance that you get to live your best life. And I've seen it. I met somebody who had been Narcan or naloxone like 12 times and finally made it and had like 3 years and was doing great. But I'm just like, you know, if somebody wouldn't have been willing to save him 12 times, he would have never had that opportunity. And we see it too much. And I've seen it too much this last, you know, year and a half. It's been rough. And during the pandemic, even more when, you know, in-person meetings were cut off. So it's like all about staying connected. I mean, that's one thing I can appreciate about, you know, you guys that I'd talked before we went live, just that like you're still out there in the community showing up. And even through the scary times, like you guys were out there showing up for people, and it means a lot. And that's what it's all about, is coming together as, you know, people in recovery. And the thing I love the most about recovery is we all come from different walks of life. We all have different political views. We have different religious views, but we can all come together with one common purpose and just leave all that shit at the door. And it's really interesting to see how strong we are as a community and how easy it is for us to leave that stuff at the door. You know, you'll hear mention about it and people are good about quickly moving on. You know, because like we're not really here to change each other's minds, but we are here to advocate for what's best. And for me, I know that harm reduction saves lives, and I know that medically assisted treatment saves lives. And for me, like, I choose love over anything. There's no personal bias or anything else that can change my view. My view for recovery is love. Like, I can love somebody into recovery. I can love somebody into a better life. I can't beat them into it, or it's my approach isn't the hard approach, and it works.
Yeah.
And we're evolving as a community, and we're seeing what an impact we can make on people's lives by just being there and holding out a hand. 2020 has been tough, but it's also been great because I have seen a lot of people come around that needed some hope. They just needed something to grasp onto. And recovery is not always easy, but the rewards that it gives, and not without effort. I feel like sometimes people are like, hey, I'm fucking in this recovery thing and I'm not getting anything. Like, where are these rewards? The rewards come with a lot of effort.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like all the service work, always trying to be out there and help and do whatever you can for people, and just showing up. I'm grateful that my full-time job is service oriented. And so I get the opportunity to show up for people in a setting where they don't have to pay. And so they're not worried about if their insurance is going to cover it or whatever. It's like they just get to show up and they get to have that appointment, and they know that I'm there for them no matter what. And it's just been really meaningful. And I can say that, like, growing up, I always wondered why my mom did social work, because DCFS pays really low. And I mean, it was the reason why we were moving all the time. And I didn't get it. And now that I work in a very similar field, I get it. Like, there is this emotional reward that comes from working in recovery that you won't gain anywhere else. I am super grateful and proud of the person I am today. I love myself. I can look in the mirror and be happy. And I get to project that out on others and remind people that they're worth it. And sometimes that's all somebody needs to know, is that they're worth it.
I think that's the most important part, and one of the most beautiful things that recovery teaches us, because, most people who go and get into recovery aren't able to look themselves in the mirror and be proud of the person that they are. I mean, and we beat ourselves up, and we've got so much trauma from growing up and through experiences and through lying and whatever it is that we have to do to hide. Like, you were a functioning addict, and so you had to, like, be two different people. Like, you had to show up to work and not be who you really were, and put a mask on every day, which is emotionally draining all in itself.
And my wife didn't know, and that was the hardest part. So I'm using at home, and she had dealt with that in her family when she was younger, but had never personally experienced it. And so for a couple of years, I'm struggling through these lapses by myself, and still trying to just show up as a father and go to work. So I'd leave early and come home late, and then I'd go pick up in the middle of the night while everybody was sleeping. And
oh gosh,
if you ever woke up, I had to have these stories. And then I'm driving around at 2:00 in the morning with dope, and I'm just like, every night I'm like, what the fuck are you doing today? Like, why are you out doing this? And every time I'd have like these really close calls, and it's just like, somebody was watching over me, and like, that's my mom for sure. And then my dad passed 6 months after I got into recovery. And that was the first thing that I got to deal with. Because once I got into recovery, I had to deal with my mom's loss. And then when my dad passed away, I had to deal with that. And I dealt with it sober. And now I know that I can deal with anything. Like, I can make it through anything now. And, my dad got to see me get sober. And my mom got to see me rise up and, be what I can be at my full potential. And so I have no regrets there. My parents got to see me in two different respects become these two different versions, the best versions of me. And now I get to take all those skills and abilities and use them for the rest of my life. But for me, working in recovery is this pause until I can go and start my own thing. I'm on a pause right now, and it's so humbling to be able to have this opportunity to love people where they're at. Like, literally just love them right where they're at. It doesn't matter. I don't care if somebody's using, not using. I don't care if it was yesterday, today. Doesn't matter to me at all. Clean time doesn't matter to me. My approach is just not the same, because I just want people to be able to reach out and be open. If I can help somebody reduce some harm in their life so that they can live, That's what I'm there for. I try to push recovery for people who want it, and for people who don't, that's okay too. I'm still here to support them because I'm at a place now in my recovery where I feel comfortable doing so. And it just like, I have too many numbers in my phone. I have 30 people I'd call before I'd ever go use. And that's just too many. Like, I would never get through half those phone calls. And then so like, that's my accountability. I I think about the people that I would call, and I'm just like, I don't even want to call them and tell them I want to use right now. So I'm just not going to do it. Like,
That's
not to
awesome.
use, I'm also not going to call them because I'm good. Like, I will be just fine, and I get past it. And now I can talk to my wife about it. Now we have really open conversations about it. Because it's not her fault when I get triggered. It's just this chemical imbalance in my brain. But it's something that I get to talk openly about, and something that I get to share with other people and families and people who have loved ones who are struggling. And it helps to have, resources, number one, but number two, the lived experience all the way through. I can share the growing up with an addict parent. I can share, being an addict child from when I was young. I mean, I have all of these different kind of facets of recovery that I dealt with at all these different angles. And now I get to use that as like this hope and inspiration that I can share to just help others. And I always try to share just a lot about who I am so people can see, I don't know. I'm proud of who I am, and I'm proud of my past. And I stand up for what I believe in. So for me, it's like LGBTQ rights, harm reduction, medically assisted treatment, recovery. Just being there for people. Like, that's what life is all about. And I can be really grateful today. And actually, I'm really grateful that we're doing this on Thanksgiving week, because I'm so fucking grateful for recovery and for you and this opportunity. I haven't shared my full story really. So tonight was kind of that first. I share little bits and pieces, but I usually don't go all the way in. But I mean, going back to my childhood really kind of circles around about like where my whole life was, and the differences that I have today, and what kind of makes me the person I am today.
I think it's beautiful, and like that's the part of of recovering out loud and not being anonymous that I just think is so powerful, because we get to and everybody doesn't have to. I mean, I definitely understand that there's people that work in these really political jobs or in places that they just cannot be open and honest about stuff, which, and I hope with the work that we're doing that one day it will be more socially acceptable, and not maybe not socially acceptable, but like worker environment friendly. Like, we've got a couple people that do some really great stuff with us, but they cannot be out there as the face of recovery, because they'd lose their house, their kids would have nothing to eat, and so I love that you and your story was totally powerful. Like, I had chills half the time. It was really just, it's good to hear, and it's nice to hear you grew up in a certain way, but it molded you and formed you. Like, if you didn't have a mom who damn near processed you your whole life, your addiction probably would have been a lot worse. I was a kid that went into treatment 3 times before 18 as well. And so one of the best things that ever happened to me was treatment. As a kid, you don't like it, but
Yeah.
but you learn the I wouldn't say I learned too many great tools, but I got to learn how to start processing things, which I feel like helped me as traumas in my life started to happen, because I got to go back into my little toolbox from when I was a child and be like, oh, wait, you got to talk about the feeling. You have to tell people how you're feeling, and you got to do this. And it's like, I don't really like, but it's beautiful. And, I, like you, have so much to be grateful for just with recovery. And I'm just so proud to be who I am, and I'm proud to call you my friend. There's in our industry, and like the recovery community in general can be almost traumatic to some people. There's a lot of bad experiences that go out there, and just a lot of things that can happen, and having people like you who are out there advocating and using love as your as your tool to help people. You know, one of my favorite expressions that people use is loving people where they're at. And I didn't understand what that meant because people are really judgy, you know, and when we can meet people who will, as you say, you know, use love as your tool to help people. I mean, some people need a straight shooter. Some people need that person that's going to beat them down 100 times, you know, mentally and whatever it is. And I'm one of those that I don't receive like that because it was
Yeah.
hard in my home. You know, it was hard. That was, I don't want that. I want to be loved. Damn it. Sorry, my nose is itchy now.
Well, that's
But
what I think. That's what I think is really important too. Is like when we talk about loving people where they're at, it's like there's these different sides of it because like there are people who aren't loud about their recovery and keep it quiet, and that's okay too. I think that like that's okay is like one of the biggest phrases in any of those. Like you use medically assisted treatment, that's okay, that's great. Harm reduction, yeah, that's great. Like you're quiet about your recovery for that reason. Yeah, that's great. Like we don't all have to be the same thing. And recovery is not. It's not linear at all. Like this is not a straight line, but it is so up and down. And we
yeah,
can all be at different places. It is a total wave. But we can all be at different places, and it's about respecting people where they're at and respecting people on what they choose. We don't get to dictate that for somebody. And if somebody makes that harsh love into reality, there are a lot of people out there willing to give it to them.
yes,
But
there are.
for the people who can't, that's okay too, because there are people on the opposite side of the aisle that are also willing to just love you in your recovery. And no matter what, you'll have the support that you're looking for. I never try to sugarcoat things for people, but I also know how to use my language correctly to not hurt somebody or shame them, because I don't want to shame somebody to death just as much as I wouldn't want to love somebody to death. I don't enable people to, and actually I hate the word enable, but I just don't want to love anybody to death. I don't want to be blind to things and allow them to die if I have the opportunity to do something for them.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to shame anybody to death. And that's what I think is important, is letting people pick their pathway and letting them run with it. Your recovery is your recovery. You decide what that looks like. You get to run with it. You really dictate those rules. Nobody can decide what that looks like because it's not a one size fits all. Recovery, it really is, person centered. And it's different for everybody. And it's evolved. I mean, it evolves for people all the time. What I do now is different than what I did 2 years ago. YPR is the one thing that's remained constant for me. But I used to attend a lot of 12-step meetings. And it's just not my thing now. And that's okay, because I still advocate for people to try 12-step. Every time I tell somebody to go, I say try one support group and try a 12-step group. Try AA, try NA,
Whatever.
use, try CA or CMA, but then try a support group as well. Try them both. Maybe you'll love them both and go to both. Maybe you'll love one or the other, but it's about finding the style that works for you and going with it. Because it's true, people come in and sometimes have this bad experience, and then that sticks with them. And for me, I remember the Magna Al-Anon Club. For me, that was recovery, and I was like, this is really boring and it sucks, and I couldn't imagine living my life like that for the rest of my life. I was just like, I can't do this is too much. These guys are all here every night they're doing this and reliving some misery, and I can't do that. And so had I been stuck with that forever, I wouldn't have never recovered. But luckily, I was brought into a support group that was solid and promising, and it showed me that recovery can be fun and exciting. And recovery should be. It should be something that you enjoy, something you get to do, not something you have to do. And that's the difference in my recovery today, is like I get to do it. I chase my recovery like I chase dope, and I used to do that shit at crazy times at night. And so I do the same thing for my recovery. If something's going on, like, recovery doesn't sleep. And so just the same, like I put in just as much time into my recovery as I did getting high. And for me, for years, that was all the time. So recovery for me is just an all the time thing. It doesn't stop.
You're so awesome. I just love you. I could listen to you for hours.
I love you too.
Yeah, you're great. You. We can, we're at our 1 hour mark. And cool. So I don't want to keep you away from your family, because you definitely have a house full over there. And I have kids who still got homework to do. And my dad's calling me upstairs. It's so awesome. So we're bonding right now. I won't tell the whole story, but we're watching The Crown. So every night we try to watch two or three episodes of The Crown. So I'm going to go bond with Pops, which is like beautiful. But thank you so much for jumping on here and sharing your story and being vulnerable and, allowing us to get to kind of know who Adriel is a little bit more and sharing that hope for other people. Um, for anybody who doesn't know Adriel, he's definitely a person you can reach out to if you're struggling, and he works really hard and is passionate about, being a part of the change and the recovery movement. So I'm super grateful that you were willing to come on here today, and glad that, that I get to call you my friend.
Same. Yeah. Really, really glad that you're my friend, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Anybody who needs support, feel free to reach out anytime. My inbox is always open, and I'm always willing to be anybody's friend in recovery. So if you feel like you don't have friends in recovery, add me and you'll have one. So
yes, I really love you.
I love you too. Have a good day.
All right. Have a good night.
Thanks. See ya.